Gene Wilder finally reveals what most fans never figured out about Blazing Saddles. Millions of people have watched Blazing Saddles. They can recite the campfire scene, the punch that flattens a horse, the moron's line, the pie fight that spills off the studio lot entirely. It's been called the funniest comedy ever made by the American Film Institute. But almost nobody clocks the one choice that actually holds the whole thing together. And it isn't a joke at all. It's the exact opposite of a joke. It's one actor doing everything in his power not to be funny, in the middle of the funniest movie of the decade. That actor was Gene Wilder, and the role almost didn't belong to him at all. Chapter 1. A part that was never supposed to be his. Before Wilder ever set foot on the set, the role of the Waco Kid belonged to someone else entirely. Mel Brooks first offered the part to John Wayne, who reportedly turned it down because he thought the script was too outrageous for his image. Though Wayne apparently told Brooks privately that he'd be first in line to see it. The role then went to Gig Young, a respected, Oscar-winning actor who, on paper, looked like exactly the kind of seasoned performer who could ground a broken-down gunslinger with real gravity. But Young was fighting a private, worsening battle with alcoholism. By some accounts, he had actually tried to get sober right before filming began, which is a cruel irony given what happened next. On his very first day on set, his body went into alcohol withdrawal. He, reportedly, began shaking uncontrollably, and by the time anyone realized what was happening, he had collapsed. Mel Brooks had no choice but to shut down production and let him go. That left Brooks with an outright crisis. A leading role, no actor to play it, and a production already rolling with a cast and crew on the clock. He turned to Gene Wilder, his collaborator and friend from the producers a few years earlier, and Wilder said yes almost immediately. There wasn't time for a long negotiation or a careful read of the script. Within roughly a day, Wilder was on set, stepping into a character he'd never rehearsed, inside a production that had just nearly come apart at the seams. It's worth sitting with how strange that is. Most performances, this iconic, come out of months of preparation, workshopping, rewrites. This one came out of an emergency phone call and a plane ticket. Chapter 2. The choice nobody was expecting. Here's the detail fans consistently miss. Once Wilder had the part, he didn't try to be funny with it. Blazing Saddles is a film built on chaos, a runaway pie fight, characters punching horses unconscious, a fourth wall that doesn't just get broken but gets walked straight through onto the next soundstage. Every performer in that cast is playing big, loud, and cartoonish, because that's exactly what the material demands of them. Wilder does the opposite. As the Waco Kid, he's quiet, tired, almost mournful. He plays a man who has clearly lost something, his nerve, his edge, maybe his will to care about anything. And he plays that loss completely straight, with no wink to the camera and no mugging for the laugh. That's the thing nobody talks about. Not a hidden scene, not a secret cameo, just one actor choosing total restraint inside a movie that rewards excess at every turn, and doing it so effectively that most audiences never clock how different his performance actually is from everything happening around him. His stillness becomes the frame the rest of the film's madness sits inside. When he delivers the now famous line about the common clay of the New West, morons, it lands as hard as it does because of the flat, weary delivery underneath the words, not despite it. Take that restraint away, and the film risks becoming a string of disconnected gags with nothing holding them together. Wilder's performance is the quiet spine of a very loud movie. There's a reason it worked, and it wasn't accidental. Wilder had built a career on precisely this kind of contrast, the calm eye at the center of somebody else's storm, going back to the producers, where his neurotic accountant played off Zero Mostel's chaos in almost exactly the same rhythm. He understood something a lot of comedic actors never quite learn. That stillness reads louder than noise when everything around it is shouting. Chapter 3. The Partner Who Never Made It on Screen. There's another piece of this story that doesn't get talked about nearly enough. Richard Pryor. Pryor was part of the original writer's room that shaped Blazing Saddles, working alongside Brooks, Andrew Bergman, Norman Steinberg, and Alan Ugger to build the film's voice. Its rhythm, its willingness to say things a polite studio comedy simply wouldn't touch. Brooks originally wanted Pryor to star as Sheriff Bart, the role that eventually went to Cleveland Little. But Warner Brothers executives, wary of Pryor's off-screen reputation and the insurance risk of putting him at the center of a major studio release, wouldn't sign off on him as the lead. So Pryor stayed behind the camera, shaping the script's sharpest material, while someone else stepped into the role he had helped build from the ground up. Wilder and Pryor would go on to become one of the defining comic duos of their era in films like Silver Streak and Stir Crazy a few years later. It's hard not to wonder what a Blazing Saddles, with both of them sharing the screen, might have looked like. Whether the Waco Kid's quiet sadness would have played differently across from Pryor's live wire energy. We'll never know. That pairing simply arrived a little later than it could have, and when it finally did, audiences responded instantly, which suggests the chemistry Brooks first sensed on paper was real all along. Chapter 4. Keeping a Straight Face. Wilder's performance created an unusual production problem. The crew couldn't stop laughing. By multiple accounts from people who worked on the film, some of Blazing Saddles' most memorable scenes required several takes, not because Wilder's delivery was off, but because his timing caught camera operators and sound technicians completely off guard. His lines weren't broad punchlines built to cue an audience. They were dry, understated, and landed with such unexpected precision that grown professionals, standing just off camera, would lose their composure mid-take. Cleveland Little himself reportedly had moments where he broke character reacting to Wilder in real time, which is part of why some of their scenes together feel so genuinely alive on screen, because, in a very real sense, they were. Mel Brooks was famously not immune to this either. He was known to laugh loudly enough during takes that his own laughter occasionally bled into the audio, forcing crew members to ask the director of the picture to step away from set so filming could continue. It's a strange thing to picture, a film this anarchic, this loud, occasionally grinding to a halt because one actor was being too quiet and too precise for anyone around him to hold it together. Chapter 5. The Weight Underneath the Joke. What makes the Waco Kid endure isn't just that Wilder underplayed him. It's what that underplaying was in service of. Watch the jailhouse scene closely, the one where the kid explains his shaking hands and his lost nerve, and there's no punchline energy in his voice at all. It plays less like a joke setup and more like a confession. The character is written as a burned-out alcoholic gunslinger, which in a lesser film could have stayed a cheap punchline for the entire runtime. Wilder chose instead to play the character's exhaustion and disillusionment as genuinely real, layering something close to sorrow underneath the comedy. It's a small, specific acting choice, and it's the reason the character still resonates with audiences who first saw the film 50 years ago and audiences discovering it for the first time this year. Comedy typically rewards speed, volume, and energy. Wilder's power in this film came from the opposite instinct: patience, hesitation, quiet. That contrast is exactly what critics and historians have pointed to for decades when they talk about why Blazing Saddles has aged as well as it has, even as some of its era-specific material has been re-evaluated with fresh eyes. The satire lands harder because there's a real, wounded person standing inside it. Chapter 6. Where Young Frankenstein was actually born. One more thing most people never connect to this film. Young Frankenstein started here, on this set, during this shoot. In the downtime between setups on Blazing Saddles, Wilder began talking with Brooks about an idea that had nothing to do with the Old West. A story about Dr. Frankenstein's grandson desperately trying to distance himself from the family name. By most accounts, Brooks wasn't immediately sold. He was buried in the very real demands of the film he was already shooting, one that was already fighting the studio over content. But Wilder kept working the idea on his own time, eventually producing a draft. And when Brooks finally sat down and read it, something clicked. What had started as a stray thought traded between takes on a Western spoof became, by the end of that same year, one of the most beloved comedies ever made. And the two films were released within months of each other, an almost unheard-of one-two punch for any filmmaker. It's a reminder that some of the biggest ideas in film history didn't come out of a pitch meeting. They came out of two people killing time on a set, trusting each other enough to say the strange thought out loud. Chapter 7. Fighting the studio for the film's teeth. Blazing Saddles almost didn't survive the studio system that made it. Warner Brothers executives were uneasy with the film's racial satire and its blunt, confrontational language from the start. And when the film was first screened for studio staff, the reaction in the room was reportedly close to silence. Almost none of the executives laughed. It looked, for a moment, like the studio might shelve the picture entirely. Brooks, understanding exactly what he was up against, arranged a second screening, this time for the studio's regular employees rather than executives. That audience laughed from start to finish, and it was that reaction, not the first one, that convinced Warner Brothers to release the film as written. Brooks fought hard to keep the script's edge intact, and he wasn't fighting that battle entirely alone. The cast around him, including Wilder, understood that softening the film's racial commentary would have hollowed out the entire point of making it in the first place. The satire only works because it refuses to look away from the ugliness it's mocking. Sand the edges off, and it becomes a much lesser movie. A fact the studio's own hesitant first reaction almost proved by accident. Chapter 8. The legacy Gene helped cement. Blazing Saddles has had one of the strangest afterlives of any American comedy. It was selected for preservation by the Library of Congress in the National Film Registry in 2006, recognized as culturally, historically, or aesthetically significant, the same distinction given to films like Casablanca and Rocky. A genuine rarity for a film this irreverent. Decades later, the American Film Institute went a step further, naming it the single funniest film ever made, moving it past Some Like It Hot to the top spot on their list of great American comedies. None of that happens if the film is only broad chaos from start to finish. It endures because there's a real emotional center holding the anarchy together. And that center is Gene Wilder's Waco Kid, a character built almost entirely out of things Wilder chose not to do. He didn't shout. He didn't mug for the camera. He didn't compete with a cast full of performers who were all, understandably, going as big as the material allowed. He trusted that restraint would cut through the noise. And 50 years later, it still does. Gene Wilder didn't get this role because he auditioned for it in any conventional sense. He got it because a production was falling apart on day one and somebody needed to walk in and hold the center, with almost no preparation and no time to think it over. What he built out of that emergency ended up outlasting nearly everything else in the film. Quietly, on purpose, exactly the way he played it. If this changed the way you'll watch Blazing Saddles next time, let us know in the comments which detail you never noticed. And stick around, because there's a lot more of this story still to tell.